bring the special joint meeting of Energy and the Environment and Budget and Finance Committee to order. It looks like we've got 3 members from Energy and Environment, 4 members from Energy and the Environment, and 1 from Budget. 2 from Budget. Oh, very good. Very good. 3 from Budget?
Yeah, we're Budget.
Well, we're legal. Are we legal?
Very legal.
All right, very good. Mr. Krikorian, would you like to open up the meeting?
Fire away.
All right, in that case, let's go ahead and bring up our presenters. But as you all come up, I do want to thank the committee for entertaining this motion and for your patience, because this has been a very difficult situation that we've all have had to realize as a result of what has been a not so good rollout of this billing system. And as a result, you all may remember that we collectively agreed that something needed to be done, and we went ahead and introduced a motion that went forward to say that we need to have a better sense as to what's happening. More than a better sense, Mr. Pickle, come on up because you're going to be involved with this. More than a better sense, we needed to have the department and affected city family members get together and have a stakeholder task force process so that we know on a weekly basis what it is that we're doing to remediate all of these issues. And as a result, members, we will have this item in this committee until we have a better sense for the time frame, how soon it is that we can expect to have accurate bills and satisfied customers. I will say that in the middle of all of this, in fairness, the department has gotten a new general manager, and so we are very hopeful that we're going to be able to accelerate everything that you tell us today so that we can get to a place where we're sending good, reliable, and accurate bills to our customers. And so I want to thank you for your hard work. I also want to thank you for the fact that in many ways you all have already made the admission that this has been an unacceptable mistake. And I think that's really important for those who are paying attention to this issue, because the frustration is wide, as you all know. But your ability to be able to say that this is a big mistake and unacceptable is a really important step, I think, in us getting together to understand what it is that we are going to have to do in order to fix this problem. So with that, colleagues, unless somebody else has an opening statement, I will have the department review for us where we are on our revenue collection, etc.
Okay, my name is Phil Leiber. I'm the Chief Financial Officer of Department of Water and Power.
Randy Howard. I'm the Interim Executive Director of Customer Services.
I'm Fred Pickle, Executive Director of the Office of Public Accountability, Ratepayer Advocate.
So we have a short presentation that we thought would help enlighten everyone on the issues we're confronting and what we're doing about them. In this presentation, we'll talk about our collections year to date, what we're doing to get those collections back where they need to be, and the impacts that the under-collections have had on the department and potentially on the city. So with that, I'm going to go right into the issue that we faced, apart from the frustrations our customers have been experiencing, is our cash collections have fallen short of expectations this year. So what we have here is a bar chart that shows collections year to date, and ideally the bars would be up close to the 100% level. Now there's going to be always going to be some variation between what we plan on and what's actually collected. There'll be differences in volume, differences in customer payment patterns, and so forth. But we've been seeing bigger variations this year than we might have expected. And a good portion of this is attributable to the difficulties we've faced in the cutover to the new system, particularly the issues in getting bills out on time, and the fact that we had to suspend our collection efforts to avoid overwhelming our call center with customers calling about potentially erroneous bills. So what we've seen overall for all the products that we collect money for is that we're about 91.8% of where we should be, and that's for water, power, sanitation charges, and other taxes. This does reflect where we should be in terms of volumes. So on the power side, our volumes are down about 1.5%. On the water side, they're up 3%, so we've made adjustments for that. So this is kind of on a net basis, we're still short of where we should be. Collections have varied by product. Here we see the 5 major categories for which we're monitoring. On power, that's where we're seeing pretty much the largest variation. We're about 90.7% of plan. Water's looking a little bit better, 93. Sewer's pretty good at this point, 98. Utility users tax, 91, and some other sanitation charges also about 91%. And we'll talk about what's been driving that and what we're doing about it, and I'm going to turn that over to Mr. Howard.
Thank you. So I wanted to go through just a number of the activities that we have going on, give you some of the statistics. As indicated, we are posting weekly our dashboard of all the statistics and all the measures that we're going through. Some of the recent activities still leave us at relatively high call wait times. So as you can see, as of the second week of March, we're still at 27 minutes average. That means, and that's average, so we still have call wait times much longer than that period of time. And what we're trying to do as we're working through some of these fixes in the collections, we'll go through it. It's a balancing act because we're trying to minimize the impacts to customers on the call wait time, so we're releasing some of our collection activities in batches in such a way that we don't overwhelm our call center any more than it already is. And so that will be kind of a general theme going forward. We'll be monitoring while we're continuing to work on getting this down to an acceptable level. We will be adding to it as we continue to focus on our collections to get the revenue back in the door. Some of the activities that we've done to improve this as well is we do have 49 emergency CSRs, call center representatives that have been hired. They're in training. They are not yet working. They will not be working on the phones until the end of this month. We'll be bringing them on. It will have a significant impact on reducing the call times and working some of these issues down. Another element that has impacted some of the call times is we did send out an apology email to 700,000 of our customers. We did an apology bill onsert, 1.4 million of our customers.
Did you send one to Debbie Kim in my office, who lives in an apartment on Rampart Boulevard? I had a $33 bill usually, and it was a $2,300 bill. You send one to Debbie Kim?
We attempted to send one
Good job.
to every one of our customers out there.
Believe that? $30 a month, $2,300 bill.
We have reached out, and we'll talk a little bit more on the collections campaign that we do have going on as well. So there are really 2 buckets of outstanding funds that we need to collect, and one group of them is the delayed bill estimate. So these are delayed bills that have not yet been issued. There is a problem with the bill. So the system has identified there's a problem, and it's going to take some type of process in order for us to push this bill out. It could be bad meter reads. It could be bad data sets. The billing system itself, we bill 4 commodities, and is quite complex. And things such as our standard rates. So if you were to consider our rates for a water rate alone, it depends on, do you live in the valley or do you live south of Mulholland Boulevard? Your allocation could be different. How many people live in your household? That's a difference in how much allocation you get towards your water tier rates. These factors all have to be accurate in order to get an accurate bill, because if we don't know how many people are in that household, the bill won't bill. It's going to wait until we tell it. So there are a number of criteria that we are working our way through to ensure that we can get all these bills out. And as you can see, we've been focused on getting these delayed bills out the door and then to our customers. And we want to make sure the bills we're now sending are accurate. So there's a lot more diligence that's taking place.
And I should note we've made a lot of progress on that just in recent weeks. When we were in front of you at the last meeting on this topic, that was closer to 150 million. So we've really been drawing this down and keeping that balance to avoid sending out $2,300 bills where it really should be 30. A lot of these get caught in a queue where they have to be manually checked to make sure they're accurate. But this shows the progress that's been made.
So I have a question on this slide here. So those numbers also contribute to the undercollection, but that's by design, because you don't want to send out incorrect bills. So you're delaying bills as a result, which is also contributing to the undercollection. Is that correct?
That is correct. So we're sending out about 40,000 bills a day that we're working our way through, and about 2,000 out of that 40,000 kick out. because the billing system says there might be a problem. They're either a little high, a little low, or there might be an issue. They kick out, then it has another process that we have to go through before we're willing to send those out. They could get kicked into this. A delayed bill could be a bill that's just a couple days late, or it could be they haven't billed in 6 months. So we're working through this. The one thing that we're working on, too, is we're going highest bill first in our work down here. So previously we were working off of maybe the oldest outstanding. That could have been a residential. Right now we're focused on, let's work on the biggest dollars first and get these dollar amounts down, ensure that we're getting our commercial customers primarily paid up. And very soon, though, towards the end of this month, we need to start working both ends of that delayed bill. Because someone could have a meter read one day, it goes into the system, it kicks out as a potential problem. We don't want it sitting there for days because the customer doesn't even know it's a delayed bill yet. We need to start working those because we have customers that have never had an issue through this whole implementation that all of a sudden could have a problem because we're not working that delayed bill. So we're going to work it from both ends into the middle here fairly soon, but right now we're focused on the largest dollar amount first. One thing I do need to let you know on this one, and Phil's reminding me, the queuing here will never go to zero. This is not a number you will ever see zero. The department will always be, in our billing cycle, will probably have a number sitting around 40 to 60 million. So I need to build that expectation. That was before we went with the new system. That'll be after this system is normalized. You will always be kicking out because 3 days after you read the meter, if it hasn't sent a bill, it's a delayed bill. And there could be a number of reasons, but we're always checking and working those through. The ideal situation, though, is they're never longer than a billing cycle. So that's the goal that we have. We will never have them delayed longer than a single billing cycle. We should never get into a situation again where someone hasn't received a bill for 6 months. Bills awaiting payment. This is the largest contribution right now to our under collection. So these are bills that have actually been issued. And we're showing you just the numbers related to those that are outstanding greater than 60 days. So as you can see, as of the second week of March, we were at about 230, 240 million in outstanding bills. Towards the end of February, the beginning of March, we indicated to this committee, to the Energy and Environment Committee, that we were starting our automated collection process. We have now started that, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But outside of that, we were working some of these, but we did not automate it. We did not go out and seek the collections on these. We were told in November to stand down on some of the collections in the severance process. We were doing some collections, but now we have turned the automation back on. And again, I'll go through that schedule in a moment in another slide. But for these customers, we have sent now 167,000 of them what we call our soft credit collection campaign. We've provided them additional notification that they owe us. They have an outstanding balance due. And we're going to continue working those campaigns on a soft level before we start getting into more of a severance. And I'll talk on how that's going. One of the outstanding issues has been we have been estimating too many bills. We have not been reading all of our meters, so we've put a lot of effort and focus. We hired 21 emergency meter readers. We still have 19. We're going to hire permanent meter readers to assist us. As you can see, though, we're now making good progress on this. So we're reading the actual meters. We're getting real reads, so we shouldn't end up with an estimated bill. So as of March to date, we're at about 10%. It's our expectation we should end March below 10% for this category, and we'll continue to work it down. The ideal situation would be about 3 to 4%, and those are meter locations where you can't get access in a yard or there's a dog issue or some other, you're always going to have a level. So I want to build that expectation. This will never go to zero as well. But as you can see, we're on the right path for this and getting accurate reads, because these estimated reads have then gone into potentially excess bills. Excess bills have led to call center calls, and that just starts that whole cycle.
And is that estimated goal of 3%, is that consistent with your historical actuals prior to the changeover?
Yes, 3, 4, 5%, depending on the cycles, is historical average that you would see, and that would be typical for most utilities. I discussed work down. So what are we doing to get that almost $240 million collected? Because it's our expectation, if a customer used those services, we're going to collect it. Yes, we might have had problems with delayed bills, but these are customers we have billed. Now, some of them might still believe they have an incorrect bill, and they think we might know that. But in reality, if we've billed it, we think it's correct. So unless they notify us and work the details out so we can take another look, then we're going to go through a collections process. So we focused initially on any customer that was a commercial customer, owed us a bill that's aged over 90 days and greater than $10,000. And then we've worked down into the multi-residential, greater than 20,000, greater than 90 days. And you can see the plan. We will accelerate this or slow it down based on our call center times, because these are folks that will be contacting our call center. They will be making payment arrangements, or they might have questions on their bill. We want to ensure that they have access to us, so we'll toggle this one. But this is a key component to work down to get those numbers to the bottom.
There was also an interest in what is the impact of this under collection on the city's finances. And overall, we think we have a pretty good story in that the impact has been pretty minimal, and we hope will be corrected soon. The city's general fund receives revenues from DWP from two sources, the utility users tax and from the power system transfer. The utility users tax is on the order of about $350 million a year. And year to date, we appear to be tracking about $13 million below the budget that we submitted to the city over a year ago. It appears to be a slightly larger gap when we look at other factors, including our latest projections. The gap is probably about $22 million. These are monies the city will receive. The only question is timing. We only remit these funds when we receive them. So we have to wait for the cash to come in the door before we turn around and send the funds to the city. But it is really just a matter of timing. And when the monies are transmitted will depend on how fast the cash comes in the door. The plan that Mr. Howard had made reference to, we believe, should result in closing this gap probably by about 50% by the end of the fiscal year. We can't have absolute precision on that, but based on the work down plan that Mr. Howard has made reference to, that would be a reasonable estimate. So that's with respect to utility users tax. The other factor is the general fund transfer from the power system. We expect there will be no impact on the transfer. So the monies that we have remitted this year are based on the prior year's fiscal results. Those numbers are locked in. The board is already committed to that, and the money has largely been sent. One large installment in January, and the rest will be paid over the course of the fiscal year. Nothing that's happening now will impact that. Then there's the question about what about next year's general fund transfer. That is based on fiscal results that we're experiencing now. And there, too, we expect no impact at the end of the day, because the transfer is based on revenues that are accrued, not necessarily the cash collections. The fact that the collections might take a little longer to come in are not going to have an impact on the amount of revenue we recognize in our financial statements. So our assessment at this time is that the transfer would be paid in full based on our current plan, and it wouldn't be impacted.
Yeah, on that point, the CAO just put out a report, and I'm wondering if there's somebody here from the CAO's office that can help corroborate that? Because and it looks like it just came out today, so I haven't had a chance to thoroughly review it. But it seems here that that there is a potential for deferred revenue impacts to the general fund, and I'm just wondering if you couldn't sort of speak a little bit to what the report says.
Correct. Fernando Campos with the CAO's office, Inspector General. I definitely can cooperate the impact for the Power Reserve Transfer Fund. There is no impact this fiscal year, and we do not anticipate a fiscal impact for next fiscal year as well. In addition to that, for the electricity users tax, the anticipated deferred revenue is approximately $9 to $12 million. So it's relatively close to the $13 million that DWP is indicating. We do receive weekly transfers and weekly estimated payments as opposed to a monthly payment, and those weekly payments have been coming in consistently between $6 and $7 million per week. So currently, as of February 2014, the EUT, we have a target of $342.7 million as opposed to the $350 million just mentioned. And as of February, we're about $228.5 million. So the variance right now is approximately $6 million, and the projected variance or the projected shortfall for the end of the year will be anywhere between $9 to $12 million. And that could potentially be closed as DWP further implements new initiatives to collect those revenues.
I'm a little unclear on the interrelationship of the $13 million, the $22 million, and the 50% reduced gap. So as you sit here today, based on what you know, what do you project to be the budget shortfall on the UUT as of June 30th, as of the end of the fiscal year?
Based on what the city's expecting, it would be closed to about half. So
half of what?
So they made a reference to 9 to 12. We think about half of that would be closed. So we will still probably be left with some gap that will be recovered in the following year. So the 9 to 12 would be reduced anywhere from probably 4 to 6 million that would still be remaining uncollected at the end of the fiscal year.
And then presumably the remainder that would be deferred into the following fiscal year, probably there will be some drop-off in the collectability of that just because of the passage of time, but that should be, I would assume, relatively minimal.
That's a good point. That is a good point. The longer you have a bill outstanding, you do have a slightly increased risk of collectability. It's not a major issue at this point for us, but uncollectibles could increase slightly.
Okay. It's modest, though, in the scheme of things, which is the good news.
Yeah. If we look at who hasn't paid their bills at this point, there's some very large customers. They're going to be around, so
yeah.
It's not a matter of fly-by-night companies that are going to be gone.
Great. Thank you.
All righty, please continue.
Okay. So that's a consideration of the impact on the city. I also spoke at the last meeting about the impact on DWP. We have been getting through this quite well. By design, the utility maintains substantial cash reserves to be able to weather any storm, to be able to deal with unexpected expenditures, and to deal with revenue volatility. So that's served us well. Another factor that we've been able to rely on this year is our spending has been below plan. And this table illustrates that overall the water system is about $123 million underspent, and the power system is about $415 million underspent. The largest component of that is capital work. Capital spending has been a bit behind, and I'll talk a little bit more about that here in a moment. This breaks down our capital spending. We have water on the left-hand side year to date. The next bar over is power year to date. And the red component shows the amount that we are underspending the plan. So $124 million for water, $377 million for power. When we look at the forecast for the whole year, it's anticipated that a lot of that will be made up. So on water, the gap would fall to about $106 million, and power, $269 million. Is that a problem? Is that outside of historic norm? Not really. We expect to be able to meet our long-term mandates, and I'll talk about that in a moment. And for the end of the year, achieving about 83% in water and 86% of capital spending is pretty much in line with what we've seen over the past decade. Some years we come in right on budget, everything goes according to plan. Other times we have timing delays, and multi-year expenditures will sometimes fall into the next year. So we're seeing a bit more of that this year. But what is the story for each system? For the power system, this lists some of the projects that are contributing to this variance. So one large project is the Scattergood 3 repowering. That is on target to meet the regulatory requirements. It has to be done by the end of 2015. Spending has been below expectations to date, really just due to some equipment delivery delays, but it won't impact our ability to meet that mandate. Other major spending programs, such as the Power System Reliability Program, Silmar Converter Station, and Barron Ridge, they've also had delays in the award of contracts, but expenditures will be back on track once those contracts are awarded. Another important mandate is the Renewable Portfolio Standard. Overall, we're going to meet the next interim milestone of 25% by 2016. That's not at risk, but individual projects along the way can encounter some delays. One significant one is the Beacon Solar Project. There were some environmental mitigation issues that we had to work through, but again, we are on target. Another important program that we've ramped up in the past couple of years is on energy efficiency. We attempted to more than double our spending from about $50 million to over $130 million this year, and we have encountered some challenges in ramping up that program. So we have a lot that we want to do, but getting the people on board and getting those programs defined and up to speed, we've had some challenges. We're making good progress, but we're going to fall short of our budget this year. The longer-term mandate that we have to meet is we have to save 10% of anticipated energy consumption by 2020. And we think we're still going to be on track to meet or exceed that goal. But this year we're going to fall a little short of expectations. We had planned to save 296 gigawatt hours. We're probably coming in the range of 220 to 250. But it is something we will be able to make up in future years. And all of these projects we constantly reforecast, and we'll be updating our spending plan, and things will largely roll over. If we didn't get the work done this year, we'll get it done next year. So that's what's happening on power. And on water, similar issues. We show the four major programs that kind of characterize our overall spending. We have the Safe Drinking Water and Water Quality Program, water infrastructure, water supply, and regulatory compliance. With respect to Safe Drinking Water Program, we're generally on track there. Water infrastructure, that one has fallen a little behind. We have a limited number of people. We've had to dedicate more of them to some of the regulatory projects. So the water infrastructure has fallen a bit behind the goal of getting 130,000 feet of pipe replaced this year. As we're able to redeploy people, we will catch up with that over time. But again, that's work that needs to be done, but there's not an external drop-dead date by which we have to complete it. On water supply, some of our recycling programs have been delayed due to permitting issues. Rates actually adjust accordingly for that, so if we spend a little bit less, rates for those projects will be lower, and as we ramp up, we'll catch up with that next year. Another major program is in the regulatory compliance for Owens Valley. Work there has proceeded a little slower than planned due to finding some cultural artifacts on the project site. That's delayed work by several months, but that will be ramping up in the coming weeks. So that is what's contributed to the overall gaps and variances in capital spending. We're not concerned at this point that that's going to jeopardize any of the goals in the longer run that we want to get done or risk failing short of regulatory mandates.
Mr. LeBon, you said you had a question on this.
On recycling, I know you're not a water guy, Randy, but East Valley Water Reclamation, which was built but never turned on, and yet you talk about in the recent stories in the paper about the aquifers in the San Fernando Valley. Is there any, what is the status of the East Valley that was built but never turned on? And then can we look at that? Mr. Adams, the great waterman.
I knew there was a wiser person in the room than I.
That's true.
Sir,
But you got the power, Randy. You got the power.
Marty Adams from the Water System. The East Valley Water Reclamation Project is a large 54-inch pipeline that was going to deliver water for spreading grounds. Right now, it's only doing a little bit of water in the Sepulveda Basin for landscape irrigation. We are looking to do an advanced treatment process at the Tillman Water Reclamation Plant that'll deliver highly treated recycled water to spreading grounds through that pipeline. And that project's scheduled to be in service ideally like 2020, 2021, somewhere right around there.
Is the East Valley line built, though, to the
It's
north?
constructed, and it goes
So it's
all the way up
constructed.
toward Hanson Dam area.
That's very important. I think we should look at that. And also, Ms. Martinez would probably be very interested in it all. And all of us, we're Valley guys. We're all Valley guys, right? We're just missing Mitch, right?
That's right.
So I think it's real important to look at that, because just a technical thing, this is not water necessarily that would go into the portable drinking system at this point, but it would go in the aquifers to help clean the aquifers that have been polluted by industrial works the last 50 years. Is that correct?
That's correct. We're looking for additional 15,000 acre feet to be a critical part of the city supply.
Maybe, Mr. Chair, sometime in the future you could put that on the agenda at whatever time he thinks appropriate.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Lodge.
Thank you.
Dr. Pickle, would you like to comment before we open it up to questions from the rest of the committee?
Certainly. DWP has been helpful in briefing my office on these issues since September. When we approached them with concern over the number of estimated bills and phone calls we were getting about people who felt they were getting high bills. One of the complications in this is this was also a time period where we were seeing the effect of the rate increases that were put in place in 2012. And in the period between July 1 and November 1, people were not seeing on their bills 1 year of rate increase, but 2 years of rate increases occurring at once. So people were seeing the full 11% jump rather than 5.5% in each step. So that provokes, we feel, some of the response. And that also may have had an impact on user demand as we went into the fall. So if you look at total energy usage versus forecast, energy usage in aggregate is down by about 1%. Am I correct on that? And if you look versus prior year, which was both a warmer and colder year, we're down 3 to 4%. So that could be part of what's going on in this process, in addition to the billing issues in terms of the drop in revenue. And we've been made members of the response team that's helping the city follow up on this. One of our concerns is we hadn't yet defined when we're there. We hadn't set goals for what's good enough. Randy, in his presentation here, articulated a couple of those key goals in terms of delayed bills. How will we know when we were there? When the level is down to 40 to 60 million. And bills awaiting payment. How will we know when we're there? 3 to 4%. And that's where our current levels are multiples of those numbers, but at least that gives us a target against which we can measure, and we'll know when we've arrived at the end of the journey. In terms of capital and O&M spending, one of the programs that's in base rates that was part of the previous rate increase where it was increased was the Power Reliability Program, or more colloquially called the Pole Replacement Program. And we're behind on that quite substantially as one of the key components of the capital and O&M shortfalls, particularly capital. 8-9 years ago, a study said we need to replace about 5,000 poles per year. In the budget, it was increased last year so that we would be replacing between 1,500 and 2,000 poles. The prior fiscal year, we only did 800, and as of mid-year, this year we've only done 200. So that's an important component of things we wanted to achieve because it builds reliability for our customers. The most expensive power is the power you don't have, and we all desire that reliability and service. So it's important to get that money spent. It's going to be hard to catch up on that because the real underlying goal is 5,000, and we're not budgeted anywhere near that. On the other hand, in the short term, that's helping us balance the books and making sure the transfer goes through.
Very good. Mr. Corcoran, as chair of the Budget Committee.
Thank you, and if you'll indulge me, Mr. Chairman, most of my questions actually have more to do with energy and environment stuff than budget stuff, because I'm
That's
pretty
interesting.
satisfied.
Mine are
on
more
the,
budget related.
Good.
So go ahead.
First of all, on the customer service front, I've heard reports that the callback system that was put in place to try to reduce the wait times by offering customers an opportunity to receive a call back has not been working as well as expected. A number of people have contacted my office and said they chose that option and never got a call back. Do you have any statistics that indicate the utilization of that and its success?
So the personal callback, for those that don't know the detail, if you call and it says there's 30-minute wait time, if you were to just keep the phone up to your ear, it gives you the option to have the department call you back in that same amount of time. So you go into the queue as if you're still waiting, but someone will call you back. And so a number of us try to test that every day or every other day. I've tried myself. I've had a problem. I think the vast majority of the time it has worked. It has had a few issues. It's not really that system. It might be another part of our system that's had a problem related to the communication. But for the vast majority, it is certainly the ideal. You don't have to walk around your house for half an hour with the phone to your ear or sit in your office, listening to music from us. You can have us call you back. So it seems to be working. We have reached out as well on our e-commerce outreach. So you've seen that in a lot of our apology letter and other things. So if constituents get a hold of you and say, I'm having a problem getting a hold of DWP, you can ask them to go towards our e-commerce site on ladwp.com. As of last week, the volume on that increased 300%. But it's a simple way. You can put in your account information. You can tell us your problem. We can research it without even talking to you and then get back to you either by email or some other form to be responsive to your request. But from the callback, we have had some problems, but for the vast majority, it seems to be working great, and it seems to really reduce some of that tension that you would normally get waiting 30 minutes.
So I know that, as you've mentioned today, a significant delaying factor in bringing the response times down has been the training schedule for the CSRs, and you have a similar problem with meter reading. So what is the training? How long does it take? How long will it take to get these new hires fully staffed up? Because when it comes to meter reading in particular, I wouldn't imagine that to be a multi-month long training program. It should be something that you should be able to hire up pretty quickly. So what are your goals and expectations?
So for the customer service representatives, the current training program is about 12 weeks of classroom-type training, and then obviously close monitoring as they get out on the floor and start taking calls. The 49 that have been hired seem to be a very talented pool. We might get some through that a little bit quicker than the 12 weeks. We had a number of candidates that come from Bank of America, Countrywide, AT&T call centers. So we seem to have a very talented pool with some experience at call centers. So that's about a 12-week. They, again, will not start until the end of March and start helping us out in that process. For the meter readers, it's about a 4-week training, and some of that is shadow training in routes and protocols, and they have to learn something about the department as well.
So this has been multiple months that we've been dealing with this already, so they should be fully staffed and up and running now if it's a 4-week training program.
Meter readers are now, that's where you see the impact of those numbers. You're not seeing the big impact on numbers yet in the call wait times as you are on the estimated bills. We are getting more and more of those meters read because these people are getting out of their training. One of the issues that we brought up to our Energy Environment Chair was we hired these folks as emergencies because we couldn't get civil service list out in time in order to get permanent hires. So we have been working hard with the city personnel on getting exams issued and getting lists. We do now have a permanent list for our meter readers. The challenge we have is we've just gone through and trained a group as emergencies. And the rules are, as soon as there's a list, they can stay up to 60 days, and then you need to let them go. Now, our customer service reps, we have 49 emergencies, and the day we get the list, we've spent 12 weeks of department funds training them, but 60 days, you need to let them go. So it appears there might be an exception. We're working with city personnel. We're working with our response team, the departmental response team, to see can we overlap this more, because for the call center reps, you had 28,000 applicants. They went ahead and tested 1,500. So the likelihood that these 49 are somewhere in that 1,500 to be hired permanently, it's probably not a high likelihood. I mean, we'll get a number of them, but we're going to have to start training again. So we're working with city personnel to ensure that we have good overlap and we can get sufficient value out of these new folks that we've trained, because we want to ensure we get this call time down and we want to keep it down. So we've appreciated really the assistance we've received with the departmental response team on this very issue.
Okay. Now, perhaps similar. I note that the water infrastructure projects have been delayed due to delays in hiring crews. Just as the council member for the 2nd Council District, whose district has been significantly ripped up by this replacement project, I'm eager to see that done with all deliberate speed. And it seems to me that now, more than ever, we should have no problem hiring up crews with 30 or 40% unemployment in the trades. So what can we do to expedite that process and make sure that we're getting ahead of schedule instead of behind schedule in that water infrastructure replacement project? I mean, why is there a delay in hiring crews, I guess is the short question.
I'm probably not the best expert to answer that question.
With that.
Marty, as you come up, we as a result of this sort of rollout and how it didn't work, I've said it in committee a couple of times. You've got the vice chair of a couple of committees, but you've got the chair of the personnel committee here. And so I have yet to hear from the department to say, hey, we need something. I don't know if Mr. Koretz has heard from you all that you all need something, but to Mr. Krikorian's point, we need to get ahead of the next problem. So I'm as curious as Mr. Krikorian is as to what it is that we need to do to get you all the help that you need.
It takes emergency council action of some kind.
Right.
Tell us what that emergency action is so that we can do it yesterday.
I just wanted to say, to follow up what you're saying so I don't forget it, can DWP hire from the hall like Public Works can hire from the hall? Because that's the question. Because there's people out there at the hall, but if you can hire from the hall, then it solves it. And also, just last thing too, Randy, there's a lot of 311 operators who we cut their time. I'm sure they'd gladly work overtime or straight time if they got it up at your operators just to help and answer the phone. All people want is sympathetic ear and leadership. But the big question is hiring from the hall. And is there anything in the contract that prevents you from hiring from the hall?
We do hire in certain parts of the organization from the union hall, but it's not the classifications that do the typical water line work. In terms of water line, one of the biggest challenges is that we are almost in constant hiring mode. We have so many retirements that are going on a regular basis. We have hired dozens of water utility workers in the last year, and then they come in as maintenance construction helpers, and then we get a water utility worker list, and we clear almost the whole list. And so we are almost in perpetual mode. We're finding that we're almost at our capacity to be able to do the function. It's if the process could be faster, there might be some ways that could help, and that's something that needs to be looked at. But we are in perpetual hiring mode now and almost exhausting our resources and our capabilities to get to that next level. That's the biggest challenge we're having. So we may have to look at more contracting of some workers, some different method, because it's just trying to get to that next level. It's just we can't move bodies fast enough.
So from the powers perspective, if I might, this last year with our integrated resource plan, we developed an integrated human resource plan to add to it, looking at the retirements that we have, the new skill sets we're going to need for the future of the power system, and then trying to match those up in the timeframes, looking statistically when our workforce will be retiring or potentially leaving the department, and when we need to do that. So then we are working with city personnel on ensuring that we're getting the right exams and the right priorities for those exams as well. I believe we're funding now 5 individuals over at city personnel to focus on our exams to help speed the process.
Oh, and again, this is, on the water side, this is a once every 100-year project that we're working on. So can we contract for some of this work? Can we speed it up in some way that's going to get around some of those routine challenges that you have in constantly hiring so that we can get this once-in-a-century project done?
Right, and we are looking at all the options we possibly can, any assistance that we might need. But in terms of that project is fully staffed, and it's, there's certain sequencing of work that has to happen, a certain amount of road that can be closed and disrupted at one time. So at least when we're on a project, we're fully on the project. It's just we can't do as many projects as we'd like to at one time.
Mr. Blumenfield.
A couple of questions. One, regarding the software company, the CIS software company that was working with DWP to do the implementation. I wanted to find out a couple of things. One, in our contract with them, are there performance metrics? And then that leads to the next question. If that's a big reason for why we've had this problem, is there liability that they would have, in which case we could potentially have some cost recovery on some of this? A couple other questions but I wanted a chance to answer that.
So I'm going to need some help on that one as well. And Matt Lamp, you want to come up? So Oracle is the software that was chosen, and then we had a system integrator. The system integrator obviously taking this off-the-shelf billing engine and customizing it for our needs. I think Matt can probably go into some of those specific details to respond.
There are some provisions in the contract. They were really related to the scenario of not being able to move forward with the system. That is, if we had to fall back to the old system, there were some liability provisions there, not for the software company, for the system integrator. That situation did not occur. So we've had a review with our attorneys about whether there's a liability around the situations we have now, and they believe there really is not. They have not fully executed their responsibilities under the contract, and we are still holding a significant amount of money.
If you don't mind my interrupting,
yeah.
I would just caution you, please, to not discuss what your discussions with your attorneys.
Okay.
It would probably be appropriate not to discuss that here in a public hearing.
So we are still holding some of their final payments. They have not completed work. They were expecting to complete that work in November. They still have staff on working with us on some of those issues they're basically absorbing all those costs until we are satisfied that the defects that were identified during the stabilization period have all been resolved. Some of the issues that we're seeing are really related to the complexity of the interaction of multiple systems, not all from the same vendor. So the best example I can give you is in addition to the billing software, we had to implement a new system for routing meter readers because the old system was basically integrated, built in, custom in the 1990s into the old CIS system. There was no way to extract it and bring it in. We went to what's considered a state-of-the-art routing system that's very GIS and map-based, and it's a learning system. We knew when we went live we were going to have some issues on the first couple cycles because while maps are very good and GIS has become very good, GIS by itself doesn't recognize things like these 5 houses, the meters really need to be read off the alley and not up on the street. And until you run that route the first time and the meter reader comes back and puts in those notations, the system gets smarter and smarter. And that's one of the reasons, one of the contributing reasons why each cycle you're seeing the number of estimated bills drop, because we're getting more reads done. The readers are more efficient as they go out in their routing, and that will continue. But we knew that there was no way to preload that routing information when you took it into production. So some of these issues are related to implementation issues. Some are just related to purely the complexity of the kind of replacement project we had here, taking something basically that was 40 years old and very highly customized in the past.
Yeah, I guess maybe as we move, I would love to drill down on that a little bit more in terms of understanding. Obviously, there's an acceptable level of risk that we undertake when we do something like this. And if we go in with our eyes open, then we do it and we prepare for it. And then there are things that happen that are due to non-performance of contractors and vendors. And in those cases, there should be some recourse that we have as either as the city or as the ratepayers, to do that. So we don't need to go into all that. I mean, you give me a sense of it, but I would love to either get a report or as some sort of follow-up to this committee, more appropriately than to me, but that we should have that kind of accounting.
I'd be glad to do a briefing on that with you if you'd like.
So then a couple other issues. One of the things my constituents worry about, and all of our constituents, is the surprise billing. All these things are going on. They're not getting a bill 6-8 months. They get this, surprise. You got another mortgage. So the question is, how many more of those are we expecting those going down? And is there a statute of limitations on that in terms of the time?
So for statute of limitations, let me go with that one first. It's really 4 years. We can rebill, we can correct bills. A customer can come to us, we can go to a customer, up to 4 years. As to, are we going to expect more? I think as you saw our delayed bill number, we're going to work that down, and our objective, and when we know we've hit it, should be in that $40 to $60 million range, and it should be within one billing cycle. We should not be into multiple billing cycles. So that's our objective, and we have a plan to get there.
And then, different topic, but on this document you're showing us, the sewer is 98%. When we were looking at the FSR, we were talking about there being a 10% delta on the sewer charges, and maybe that's. I'm trying to understand the difference. One is maybe average per year, one is or per budgeted, and one is the actuals. But you could explain that to me.
That was an astute observation. We did talk about some numbers previously. One of the things I've done since then is go back and take a look at the latest volume estimates. So when I originally prepared this analysis, it was on a little bit older budget information. So I've used kind of the freshest information, latest available information as to what volumes we would expect. So it did change some of the numbers. So
okay, so it's not a different. I thought we were comparing apples to oranges, but
the actual numbers are the same. It's kind of what we've compared it to on an expected side. We've updated some things, so it did cause some of the overall collections to change a little bit. Most of them stayed pretty much the same. Sewer was one that changed quite a bit.
Okay, and then in terms of the sanitation, because all that's on the same billing in terms of the amount.
It's all on the same billings. I think what you're seeing up on this chart is that the outstanding balances due are for various customers that have different types of usages. So it seems evident that it's heavily to those that have very large electric bills and probably a lot less related to water or sewer charges on those bills. So from a dollar perspective, that's where you're seeing the types of customers, because these are very specific customers, when you go to a cemetery, their water bill is going to be relatively high, or Anheuser-Busch, relatively high water bill, not as high electric bill for those types of facilities. Whereas we get to more of an industrial customer, we'll see higher electric bills and very little water usage in many cases.
Okay. In terms of the sanitation's collection through this system, the difference on that. I mean, is that what that last hard to read graph is? The solid resource fee.
Yeah, that's another component of the charges that we collect for sanitation.
But there's still the general the garbage collection.
So the solid resource is the garbage. Okay. The sewer is just the sewer charge. So it's those two combined that go to the Bureau of Sanitation.
Okay. Mr. Kretz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, on the personnel end, how much of this problem is personnel related to slow hiring of crews, not being able to hire enough phone personnel, and how do we pay for it? Does the City General Fund pay for the personnel process relating to DWP? Does DWP fund it?
I'll answer that. So DWP has a Human Resources Department, so a lot of the hiring activities are handled there. But we're also reliant on the city's personnel department for certain functions, such as developing the civil service lists, doing the examinations, and so forth. Ultimately, the department does pay for those services through a billing annually. So we pay our share of the costs of personnel.
So if we wanted to add personnel to personnel for this specific purpose, DWP could just add that to the budget and speed this process up.
We could, and in fact, in recent months, we have done exactly that. We had an arrangement with personnel where we said this is a real bottleneck that we need to overcome, and we'd be willing to pay for some additional personnel there to help overcome that bottleneck, and we did do that.
And our board did take that up and did approve that to, I think, fund 5 additional positions over at City Personnel.
So do those folks get hired, and have they actually reduced the bottleneck?
I think what we're seeing is we're starting to work the big priorities. As you can imagine, 28,000 applications for one classification causes quite a lot of congestion in the process. But it does appear that we're starting to get these priorities worked through.
So is 5 people enough, or should DWP be funding more?
It's fair to say that it's a start. It won't solve all of the needs. There's still the need to prioritize. Those 5 people were really directly put forward to solve some of the power system problems, but it doesn't solve the hiring issues that the rest of the utility faces, so water and the joint system as well. So one other major bottleneck that we face is in our internal procurement function. We have a new director of supply chain services. She's been here about a year and a half. She's made a lot of great reforms, but she needs additional people. And she's been asking for that for a year and a half and doesn't have them yet. So there are still hiring bottlenecks that we face.
So how do we, what's the holdup on that end? Why can't we get that funded adequately? Is the DWP board not doing it? Has the general manager not approved it?
I think in that case it's constraints within city personnel, the need to follow the process to develop the lists and so forth, that they're just stretched a little thin. As I understand it, given the recession and the downsizing, the city wasn't doing a lot of hiring, so they kind of let the number of staff assigned to that function decline, and now when we want to ramp up, it's taking longer.
Yeah, that's my concern, that the city's general funded personnel folks are impacting the non-general funded and I'd say more flexible and more necessary DWP function. So the question is, how do we get the DWP to fund more of the ability to get around that?
I think we'd very much appreciate a conversation like that. We'll go back and talk to people internally and see what ideas they have and come back with that.
And you also mentioned an apology, which I've suggested a couple times. Have we done that how have we done that, and have we done it in the bills? Because that seems like a good opportunity and an on-target opportunity.
So we have done that in a press release. We have done that in 700,000 email responses, and then to 1.4 million of our customers, we have formally sent an apology.
So have we utilized the bill to just make a general statement as well?
And we have.
Okay, very good. Let's see. So what's our estimate in terms of when the billing problem that we get calls every week? I'm sure every office is still getting them. Ours certainly is. When do we imagine that the problem will be entirely resolved? So it's at a level that it was when things were more normal in the department.
We have put a plan together to surge resources, both labor and other types of resources, for the next 3 months with an objective to get it down to an acceptable level. We will be evaluating that all along the way. We are posting on our dashboard weekly the progress there. We're meeting with the departmental response team, so that's CLA, CAO, Mayor's Office, Council offices. Every week we're meeting here and going through the details of that. So we'll continue to monitor that progress, but we're really surging those resources for the next 3 months, trying to get there.
So do you think at the end of 3 months there's a possibility that things have normalized and gotten to a more acceptable level? Or do you think it'll be longer?
I think we're going to make substantial progress. I'm going to be a little hesitant because I'm still relatively new looking at all of the issues and the problems, so I'm going to be a little cautious there because I don't want to build an expectation that I can't deliver on. But within 3 months, we will have substantial progress. I would like to see us be at a normalized level at that point.
And let me ask one general question. I don't know if it's totally on the mark, but we're continuing to push, obviously, for conservation on both the water and the power side. Have we planned for the result of that, being folks using less water and less power? Have we looked at financially and otherwise what the result is going to be of that?
When we set our rates, we do a forecast of expected electricity consumption and water consumption, and we balance all the factors that we would normally see as the population grows, as the economy grows. That would increase consumption. But when we have programs that explicitly have the goal of reducing consumption, we do factor all that into our forecasts. As to the impact of the drought and the extraordinary efforts to get people to conserve, that may have some impact, but we do have some rate mechanisms in place that ensure that the financial stability of the department is protected. So, for example, on the power side, we're entitled to collect a certain amount of revenue regardless of any variation. So if we, for example, if we overachieve on our energy consumption and we fall short of our revenue, it's actually collected in the following year. So all of that is taken into account in the rate setting process.
Very good. Thank you.
Mr. LaBonge.
Yeah, thank you very much. I just wanted to say straight out on the personnel issue, if there needs to be a review, because I think if PG&E or Edison has this problem, are they impacted? They could respond faster than you can?
I'm going to go ahead and answer that. I have not worked for those two companies, but I have worked for another city, and I think it is fair to say that the personnel practices here, while well-intended, have some impacts in our ability to respond quickly.
Yeah, so just to follow up on Mr. Krikourian, which is hitting a series of great questions there, I think we should look at that. This is an earthquake. This is an earthquake. I don't think it's a 10.5, but I'm sure it's a shock when people get these bills, and it's embarrassing because you don't want this to happen, and you're a good agency that delivers reliable energy and quality water daily. So I would like to have us look at that in some way, and if there's a motion that needs to come back before this, and maybe with personnel, this is our economic engine. There's three things that built Los Angeles. First was water and power. Second was the Port of Los Angeles. and third was Los Angeles International Airport, all with multitudes of a variety of governance. It's not just us anymore. The Council of 1925 probably made all decisions on this as they move forward and combined the Bureau of Power and Light to the Bureau of Water and created what we know as modern-day DWP. So I think we should absolutely look at that in some form or fashion. And the other question is, at 2nd and Hobart, is it 2nd and Hobart? Is that the hiring hall? If you drive over to 2nd Street, where the local 18 is that a place where you could pick people up and hire them for that because they're qualified? I would just say I would hope that is identified, because I think it impedes your ability to be great is when you have hurdles or that pick you. Right now, Public Works, when we get extra money and we're doing street work, they go to the hall and they get crafted people to come right in and be able to do the project. So I think if we could look at that too in some way as we go forward there. And also our 311 call center, is there a possibility there in some way? Because we've had to reduce them because the city, and there's nothing like someone who really answers the phone and says, look, we're going to help you. Or if they have a simple, I know, Randy, you train your people, and you're the best trainers for safety and for many things is water and power, but just the touch, people hate do you at least have music on the phone? I haven't called. So borrow our music's real good at 311.
They don't use your tape.
No, they don't.
Yeah, they should. Yeah, they should.
And that's never going to happen.
We could use some of your photos on the visual of the online system. As to 311, and I think there has been some discussion related to that. Again, one of the challenges, the system, people expect to get resolution when they call, so we need someone who understands that billing system, the capability to do the research right there and maybe resolve the problem for the customer. We do have, though, we've had a number of issues with our solar hotline, so you've had a number of constituents that have wanted to install solar, and they're just frustrated with that process as well. This week we've kicked off a number of significant initiatives, adding much more staff to those efforts, also to really bring these timelines down. But we started answering those phones. Within 24 hours, we will have someone, we either pick it up when they call or call them back and let them know that a representative that can help them will be calling them back within a particular period of time. So we just make sure that we have somebody who's answering the phone. And that's more where the 311 type call center person can be helpful to us, and we're using more clerical and other types of classifications to do that. So we're looking at all those avenues because we understand that from a customer's perspective, waiting that 30 minutes is unacceptable. So again, I'd like to, while we have the opportunity, utilize that e-commerce as much as possible. Starting this Saturday at 4 of our service centers around the city, we're opening them up.
Good.
It's an opportunity for customers to come in, deal with their bills. We'll have billers there. We'll have our normal staff there. We're going to try to set up some booths to try to train, show people how to use the online system, because sometimes it's just an intimidation of going on and not knowing quite how to use it. So we'll try to have that set up, as well as some of our energy efficiency and maybe water conservation programs, just to be able to let them know while they come out there are some other opportunities to reduce their bill.
And you've reduced over the years your community service centers, like in Lincoln Heights, like in Hollywood, right? You have there used to be neighborhood DWP service centers, but also just an idea I flashed on, and I know the mayor would like it because the mayor is a former Hollywood guy. You do a thing like DWP on the street and have like one of your trucks out of come in the yard and fix it up and go to the farmers markets where the people are and get your talented public affairs people just to get the message. Can you do this online, by the way, if I have a problem?
You certainly can go online and tell us about your problem, give us some details of your account, and we can try to resolve it right there.
All right, let me ask this technical question. If I go over to this phone on the wall right here and dial 311, I'll probably get an operator pretty quick, like within right away or 2 or 3 minutes. But if they go to DWP, they just transfer you. Should we tell our 311 operators there is an hour wait? Can I email your information or whatever it is and have them try to help bridge the gap in some way? Would you at least have staff meet with our 311 people?
Yes.
And last thing, do we want to use the satellite to read meters? I know other agencies do that.
technology is certainly going to change this going forward. We needed a new billing system. We were hand billing solar. We're doing some hand billing for our electric vehicle charging station. We really had a 40-year-old system. You don't have a 40-year-old laptop. Nobody does. So we needed to change this. This is going to give us that opportunity to go down that path where we're going to take a lot of the technology that our customers are using every day and expect us to use going forward, including smart systems, smart meters. We will be able to utilize those.
All right, but just last thing, I'd just say, instead of saying 40-year-old system, say had a system from the last century. You can only do that in this decade, you know.
Thank you, Mr. Labange. So, Randy, because there are members of the media here, succinctly, if I'm a customer, I'm a residential customer, I'm a business owner, I'm a ratepayer, I either have not received a bill or I'm confused or concerned about the bill that I have gotten. I've got a computer in one scenario and I don't in another. What do I do?
If you have a computer, go on to ladwp.com. There's an e-commerce site there. It's pretty straightforward. You should be able to give us your information, and we're going to respond to you without you having to pick up the phone. If you don't have a computer, you have a couple options. You have our service centers around the city. They're open all week for the next 2 months. We're going to open them on Saturdays, 4 of them on Saturdays for bill resolution Saturdays. We're going to try to get as many folks out there that can handle it there. And the other is if you need to call the call center, try to call later in the evening, call earlier in the morning, try to keep from calling during the peak periods of time. If you do call, utilize that personal callback option. You don't have to sit there on the phone.
What's the number?
1-800-DIAL-DWP.
1-800?
Dial
DWP.
DWP.
All right. Members, any additional questions or
What
concerns?
are the hours of the phone? When do you answer the phone?
You can call 24/7.
24/7.
Very good. If there is no objection, as Mr. Labange calls that number to try it, 1-800-DIAL-DWP, Tom.
Put it on speaker, Mr. Labange.
Mr. Corrin, did you want to close? I'm going to recommend. Mr. Krikorian.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Fuentes. So we've all kind of talked around this issue of drilling down into specific solutions for the personnel problem. So I just want to see if I can provide a little bit more specificity to that. With regard to the call centers and the meter readers, do you feel that you now have in the pipeline sufficient people to be able to meet the need, or are there still backlogs with regard to testing and developing the lists for those two classifications that need to be addressed through personnel?
We feel for those two classifications that our issues have been addressed. What we're trying to work on now is just ensuring that we get value for the training we've done as we cross over and overlap. And before, if it's going to take 12 weeks to train the next new group of CSRs in, we don't want to lose this 49 someplace in the middle of that.
Because of the emergency hiring provision.
Correct.
Okay. So with regard then to those classifications, I'd like to move that we instruct the CAO and the DWP to report back to Budget and Finance with options for adding staff to the personnel department dedicated to expediting the DWP's hiring of CSRs and meter readers. And I'd like that report back at the next Budget and Finance Committee meeting. So this is an emergency situation. We need to act on this, and so I'd like that report back for added positions in personnel paid for by the DWP and other options for expediting that process at the next Budget and Finance Committee meeting. So if that's...
I'll second that if you need a second.
You're on Budget and Finance?
Yes.
And so is Mr. Blumenfield, so I think you all have a unanimous vote for expediency, right?
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. So, and then related to that, with regard to the hiring the crews for the water infrastructure, sorry, Marty, if this is one for you as well, is a similar kind of resolution necessary to assist you in staffing up, in meeting your ongoing hiring demands for the water infrastructure, or is that just a systemic challenge that you're always going to have, or is there an actual backlog that we can address today?
I don't believe there's a backlog today, but if there are problems or solutions
situation that we can address today.
Great. Okay. Well, that's one step forward. I just have to say, in closing, before Mr. Fuentes offers his recommendations, I'm heartened by the progress that the department has made. I know this has been one of the most horrendous experiences that the department has gone through in recent years, and even more so that our constituents have gone through. And as Mr. Fuentes said in his opening, I appreciate the acknowledgement of the degree of the problem. I know the people of Los Angeles, deserve that and appreciate that the department has acknowledged that and is making every effort to try to remedy it. We just need to make sure that we're expediting this at every option and with all deliberate speed, continuing to make that progress and getting this behind us. So thanks very much.
Thank you.
Very good. And I do want to remind you all that Mr. Blumenfield did, I think, ask for, and we could work on it in the next meeting if it's okay with Mr. Blumenfield, a report back. I think what you were getting to is sort of the forensics of how we got into this problem, understanding that there are additional information technology systems that are going to have to be dispatched, whether it's DWP or as recently as the SOS LA is asking for a specialized system for their system's needs. We're going to have to really learn from this experience because, as Mr. Krikorian said, it is of real impact not just to all of us but to our customers, and we and truthfully, it's inexcusable that we don't have firewalls for us to make sure that we don't roll out this type of sort of impact on our constituents. And we have the technology. We just need to have sort of the will to and the foresight to avoid these types of problems. That being said, we're going to go ahead and continue this matter for 30 days. We're going to ask you all to come on back and to have the departmental response team to continue to meet regularly. It's a weekly basis that you all are doing that, and we would like for you all to come back in 30 days to give us another status report to see where we are, and hopefully we're getting closer to a resolution sooner than what you all project. So we're looking forward to. I was just closing, gentlemen. Mr. Labange.
Well, no, I just want to know when the department response team, 30 days is a long time. Could we send staff to those meetings?
They are meeting on a weekly basis. The CLA is there to
I know,
to
but if
protect
some of our
interests.
staff wants to come, because
we
sometimes...
will work on making
Okay.
that information available, but we're covered with the CLA's office. Mr. Correa.
Thank you, and thank you for your leadership, Mr. Chair.
My pleasure.
And
Mr.
thank you,
Labange.
DWP, for the transfers that come every so often from 111 North Hope.
And just one minor thing, I think we got, I don't know if this is the case for everybody, we got the reports about 10 minutes before the meeting. If there's a way to get whatever it is in a timely fashion so we actually can read it before the report's back, that would be great.
Very good.
Thank you.
No additional comments, questions, concerns? There's no public comment on this item, Mr. Prieto. Is that correct? We're adjourned.
Good job. Thanks.
Yeah.